Good morning, everybody. We're privileged this morning to have Congressman Darrell Issa with us to share his insights on oversight and government accountability. The past 9 years, Congressman Issa has represented the people of California's 49th Congressional District. He is currently the ranking member of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, and the presumptive next chairman of that committee come January. Congressman Issa's district includes Camp Pendleton, the largest Marine Corps training facility in the United States, and the northern portions of San Diego County and southwest Riverside County. Congressman Issa was born in Cleveland, Ohio. At the age of 17, he enlisted in the Army, serving as a bomb disposal technician for 3 years. After his Army tour, he received an ROTC scholarship and graduated with a degree in business from Siena Heights University. Upon graduation, he was commissioned as an Army officer and ultimately obtained the rank of captain. After completing his active duty military service in 1980, he turned his interest to the private sector. At the height of his career in business, Mr. Issa served as the chief executive officer of California-based Directed Electronics, a company he founded and built in the mid-1990s to become the nation's largest manufacturer of vehicle anti-theft devices, including the highly successful Viper car alarm, and many of you are undoubtedly familiar with his voice on that system asking you to please step away from the car. In 1994, Inc. magazine, Ernst & Young, and the San Diego Tribune all named him Entrepreneur of the Year. As a congressman and leader in California grassroots politics, Mr. Issa has championed the cause of smart, efficient government and has pushed legislation to balance the federal budget and promote transparency across the federal bureaucracy. In addition to his role as the ranking member of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, Congressman Issa previously served on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Energy Committee, and the Small Business Committee. Congressman Issa has described himself as a fiscal conservative committed to lower taxes and free markets. He has pushed to achieve more whistleblower protections for those who report fraud, waste, and abuse in the federal bureaucracy, and is at the forefront of congressional efforts to provide Inspector General community with additional tools like subpoena powers. But just so that you don't think you're going to get all that for free, he has recently expressed an interest in each of his 7 subcommittees, holding 2 hearings each week for 40 weeks, starting in January. Guess where some of us are going to be hanging out this year? Please join me in expressing a warm welcome for Congressman Darrell Issa.
Now, the truth is, Earl's probably the only guy that ever came before our committee, walked away with a smile because he actually had a good time. So I was only talking about how many times I was going to have you back. I'm going to open fairly seriously by saying that it is important that we consider that we are as close to a team as we've ever been starting in January. I have no illusions. You work for the executive branch. We're not a team, and yet we have to be teaming to do the same thing. And that's going to be a challenge, is to find ways not to have Congress tell you what to do, not to haul you before Congress in order to expose you or the work you're working on directly, but to find ways to make it possible for literally thousands of people whose job it is to root out waste, fraud, and abuse in government to do their job and to do it without fear of interference either from Congress or unreasonably from the executive branch that you report to. That's really a challenge that in my nearly 10 years I've seen we haven't risen to. As Earl said, I'm sort of a child of the military, having gone in at 17 without graduating high school, which tells you that I was probably one of those kids that needed to be straightened out, and I hope the Army did a good enough job. I'm never sure. My wife questions it. But the fact is that I grew up thinking that IGs were everything, because in the military, that's what you hear, is that they're going to hold accountable the claims that you're ready for combat. And I believe that IGs do that. But they have to do more. They have to do a lot more. Yesterday, I understand that another individual from Washington came and remarked about, okay, I'm being a little cute, and remarked about the number of whistleblowers and investigations and convictions. I think that's a very small part of the important job you all do. And I want you to do that, of course. I want you to respond to that. But that's reactive. If we're going to really focus on recovery, as this conference is asked to do, we're going to have to find $1.4 trillion somewhere every year that we don't have today, either through savings or through income. Now, Earl Devaney and I go back to figuring out that there was income to be had at the Department of Interior and Mineral Management that we never got. There are opportunities for income without tax increases. There are opportunities to make people pay their fair share, and there are certainly opportunities to ensure that only those entitled to payments get them. But we're going to have to do more. IGs are going to have to be proactive in finding places where things simply shouldn't occur. They're going to have to say that statutorily you're required to do it, but you may not be required to do it the way they are. And that's stretching many of your roles. It's stretching it quite a bit. But if we're going to have my committee, which includes the term reform in it, able to do its job, we're going to need sources of waste that go beyond just corruption. Sources of waste that go into the question of why do we have, even within one cabinet position, 7 or 8 different groups doing the same thing. My committee is going to have to do fact-finding, which, by the way, sometimes gets called a hearing. But we are going to have to do fact-finding through depositions, through field hearings, through calling in people to simply sit down and educate us, to find opportunities where, between the cracks, between different agencies, the same money is being spent when it only needs to be spent once. As Earl said, I served on the Select Intelligence Committee for a period of time. And you learn things that you pack away that you can't really use. But one of them that I could use was the open source center. In other words, the fact that a lot of what the clandestine world does is they simply bring together tons of information that's publicly available and then use it to cobble together what is clandestine to get a full picture. We spent a lot of money as a government on that, and I think we should be very proud that that was an example, just like recovery.gov, is an example of trying to go to that next step, trying to do better. As I traveled around the world, I discovered that every combatant commander also had one. As a matter of fact, what I've discovered is there's nothing more common than a unique open source. It's so unique that every time I go on a tour, they want to show me their open source center. Now, you have to ask, as efficiency people, why is it, if it's open, we can't just do it with one, instead of everybody having an open one only open to them? That's about the simplest thing that we could save money on, but it's not going to get us to $1.4 trillion. As the introduction very kindly said, I want to see some changes in how IGs work. I want to see it for 2 reasons. First of all, I want the IG positions and all those who come up through the system to be even more desirable than many of you obviously found it today. That means that I've got to ensure that if you do your job, you will never be punished for it. That if you're putting kids through college, you have to know that if you push the limit of what you think you should investigate, that you'll be cooperated with, that you'll get the information you want, and that if you release it in the appropriate way, you will keep your job. I think that is the most important thing, and it's unique to IGs. It's unique because, in fact, you've got to be the people, and I've been warned to be careful when I introduce this to a young crowd, but you've got to be the people that say the emperor has no clothes if the emperor has no clothes. And in fact, in government, the emperor has no clothes a lot. There's no question that every agency tells us how good a job they did. I'm often reminded as a Republican that President Bush flew out to an aircraft carrier and famously announced that effectively the war was over, mission accomplished. Now, that's been mocked plenty of times, but in government it happens every day. Every day we tell what a great job we're doing. Every day, every administration and every position seems to say how great they are. If not for independent research and independent investigation, we can't get to the reality that nobody's as good as they say they are. If you have any doubt about that, read my press releases and then look at me. Now, the focus today is going to be on where we're going to put our emphasis. And I'd like to give you a brief opportunity, if at all possible, to yell out, but you missed this, and I see the microphone, so I'm not going to miss that even if it's not on the agenda today, if somebody just has to get to the mic. But I want to say that what my committee has to do is it has to stretch what it's done in the past. To do so, I have to leverage all of you. But I'm going to give you the focus of what we're going to do. One, public safety, whether it's food and water or medicine. Government hasn't been doing a good enough job. The proof of it is as simple as everyone in this room being aware that just a couple of years ago, all the spinach disappeared everywhere in America because on one corner of one farm, one ranch next to it had cows uphill and their output leaked downhill. And it went to one packaging plant and one group of bagged spinach with one set of numbers on it actually had the contamination. We've got to do better than that. We've got to be structured for that. Most of that is a matter of making agencies do their job. There's not any new legislation required. And then there's the question of jobs and the economy. Now, I can't make jobs. As the President has discovered, nothing is shovel-ready, and you can't even make jobs by saying you're going to hire a bunch of people to do government work. It's not that easy. What we can do is we can recognize that government's going to have to go on a diet. The vast majority of $1.4 trillion will have to come out of government spending, and that I'm sure. So our committee is going to try to focus on places where money can be saved, where we can literally close agencies or sub-agencies or programs, and we're going to work mostly on that. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say that it has been pretty publicly said time and time again, and when I went through Chairman Devaney's operation, I became very aware we also can find billions of dollars in savings in theft, in the Medicare program and in other government programs that hand out dollars to people who would probably be 130 years old if they were still alive, people who never existed, don't exist, or companies that were set up only for the purpose of taking our tax dollars without providing a good or service. Those are the primary areas I hope to work in, but I also know that to do it, I'm going to have to work with this administration, convince this administration that there has to be a procedure for an inspectors general to get access to all information they want, public or private. Now that's shortcut for subpoena, but if the process ensures that you can get it, then we will have accomplished our mission, whether that's through a direct subpoena power or through a process in which you can quickly get that if you have an uncooperative private or public entity. Last but not least, I believe that government has to, from the top down, ensure that data information systems are at least cleared so that when you have, in theory, access to all the information of the agency or group you oversee, that in fact you have the ability to do it from a terminal. You have the ability to do it, you and your team, in a very transparent way. And as somebody who came out of the electronics industry, I know it's very doable. I also know that in many cases, you wait for long reports that come in formats that are hard to go through and not in real time. All of that has to change. Lest you think that after 10 years in government, I think I can do it in 2 years and go home, it's very clear that this is going to be a process begun in the next 2 years that goes on beyond that. But if we don't start today cracking that $1.4 trillion, we're not going to get there.